So back in 1992, the USA's Dream Team actually had its first Olympic game against Angola. The game was so bad, the beatdown was so bad that Angola didn't even score 50 points in that game. I have not seen a beatdown as bad as that game until I sat down to watch the first half of today's Golden State Warriors Boston Celtic game, where the Warriors finished the half down by just 44 points.
You're listening to the House of Takes NBA show with Dave Daba, the only NBA show in North America that believes the Rudy Gobert trade worked out for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Presented by Stealth.ltd.
Welcome back to the House of Takes NBA show. I'm Dave Daba, and as always, I am coming to you live and on tape from the heart of the Silicon Valley. We are going to discuss our top story of the night in just a little bit, which of course is the utter and total, absolute mass destruction of the Golden State Warriors and what it means about the Boston Celtics. We're also going to get into the disservice that the San Antonio Spurs have done to Victor Wembanyama. By the way, San Antonio has won their second game in a row. Wemby, 31 points tonight, and he had 6 blocks. A dominant performance by one Victor Wembanyama tonight over the Indiana Pacers at home. We're also going to talk a little bit about the 76ers and the Mavs, and the New York Knicks going into Cleveland and taking down the Cleveland Cavaliers. I know no Donovan Mitchell on the Cleveland side, but as it turned out, Jalen Brunson got hurt and no Jalen Brunson in that game. So we will also talk a little bit about that, as well as your National Basketball Association standings and where everything lies. But first, tonight, we begin with the utter and total absolute mass destruction, if you will, of the Golden State Warriors. Now, for those of you that had Lester Quinones on your bingo card as being the top scorer for the Warriors today, then you win a big prize. 17 points for him. Essentially, things got so bad that Steve Kerr went ahead and sat out the starters for most of the second half of the game. Now, I could sit here and rattle off the stats from the game. You know, the Jaylen Brown had 29, Tatum had 27, Peyton Pritchard pitched in with 19, and Derek White had his usual 14, 8, and 3. But I think what's really at play here was Steve Kerr. While I understand he was undermanned heading into this game, no Wiggins, no Podzinski, and a couple other key players out, but still they had a good enough roster to not be down by 44 points at halftime. I mean, that is just absolute total mass destruction. And if you will, it is bad coaching by Steve Kerr. Let's call it what it is. It is bad coaching by Steve Kerr. But enough from me. Let's hear what Stephen A. Smith has to say about the game at halftime.
An epic butt whipping. That's right. I'm right here. Not Bob. This is me. Wow. There's language that I can't repeat because we're on network television. I won't do that. This is an epic butt whipping. This is so bad, Kendrick Perkins needs to take off that suit. This is so bad that Bob Myers, who's going to be calling the Warriors game this Wednesday when Golden State plays them, shouldn't even go back. They should postpone the game and give the Warriors about a week to recover. I ain't never seen anything like this. This ain't the end of the game. This is halftime. The Golden State Warriors were nearly down by 50 at halftime. Jason Tatum's doing his thing. Jaylen Brown is doing his thing. Prickett sitting up there with scoop shots. Going to Kuminga don't know what the hell he's throwing up. Draymond's trying. Everybody, it doesn't matter. Steph Curry looks like, first time I've seen just Steph Curry, don't even look like he belongs out there. This, none of us saw this coming. We want to apologize to the American people, you understand, for what we just saw in this first half. We ain't seen that. That could have happened to me. It might as well be me out there limping playing against Boston. That's how bad Golden State was.
That would be worse.
That would be worse. I'm not sure.
Yes,
I'm just not sure.
I know that.
I'm just not sure.
You out there,
I'm just not sure.
It would be worse.
That's
score.
right. Busting my butt with a messed up ankle and everything. I can't possibly look worse than that.
It would be different.
I mean, Lord.
Okay, so that was Stephen A. Smith with his passionate comments at halftime about the Golden State Warriors being as far down as they were. I mean, it was really seriously, like I brought this up, but the 1992 Dream Team, I remember sitting down watching that game against Angola. And really seriously, I've probably seen thousands of basketball games literally since then, and I don't think I've seen a beating as bad as that one. It was just so bad, at least for the first half of the game. It was just so bad and so hard to understand how Steve Kerr could allow that to actually occur. Now, the Warriors certainly had been playing much better basketball over the last month and a half than they were before. And I certainly didn't expect the Warriors to go into Boston and win today. That was not on my bingo card. I did expect, though, that the Warriors would actually show up and play better. I mean, and I know the starters didn't really play in the second half. So these stats are really about the first half, which is 4 points for Steph Curry, 6 points for Draymond Green. Look, I know this Boston Celtic team is good, but that was just way over the top in how they handled the Warriors today. Now, Steve Kerr talked about the strategy that they had put in place, and they were going to essentially back off of Jaylen Brown and allow him to drive, which is never a good idea against Jaylen Brown. So I didn't think their strategy worked, but what was worse than the initial strategy not working was the lack of adjustments made by Steve Kerr in the first half of that game. All right. Let me know what you think. Those are my thoughts on that particular game today. Elsewhere in today's game in the association, Philadelphia played pretty well. They went into Dallas and took down the Dallas Mavericks. I've talked a lot about the Dallas Mavericks over the last week and a half and how the Dallas Mavericks are my black horse, the team that I could still see making a move in the Western Conference. And ever since I started saying that, the Mavericks have been going sort of in the opposite direction. Look, Tobias Harris, when he wants to play well, does play well, 28 points today. And Tyrese Maxey was absolutely phenomenal, at least in the first half of the game. 24 for Maxey, and Oubre Jr. That's right, Kelly Oubre Jr., who I'm sure the Golden State Warriors wish they still had 21 points in that game. And I think there's some hope. There's some hope in Philadelphia that Joel Embiid will be back at some point. And suddenly this Philadelphia 76er team, which has been walked over all over for the most part for the last couple weeks, looks like they have some life. And this was another game where I thought one coach outcoached the other, and I felt like Jason Kidd got handed it to him today in that particular game. I mean, Luka, 38 points, 10 assists, 11 boards. Kyrie, 28, 5 and 4. It wasn't them. PJ Washington pitched in 13. I think like what happened in that particular game was, obviously Philadelphia got out to a big lead. Dallas came back and closed it up and made it close at the end. I think it was just too much of a lead for the Dallas Mavericks to ultimately overcome. This was one of those games where if there were 5 more minutes in the game, the Mavericks probably would have ended up winning the game. No Donovan Mitchell tonight in Cleveland. The New York Knicks ended up winning. Jalen Brunson did start the game, got hurt a minute into the game. So no stats line tonight for Jalen Brunson. And Josh Hart played 45 minutes in the game. 45 minutes for Josh Hart, 19 rebounds, 10 assists, 13 points, a sort of non-traditional triple-double by, if you will, a forward or wing player, because usually you'd have more points than rebounds, but Josh Hart is just playing so hard. Also, I want to point out Dante DiVincenzo, 28 points today. And, when Dante does that, the New York Knicks are extremely dangerous. Remember, no Jalen Brunson in this game, except for the first minute. So essentially no Jalen Brunson in this game. I know Donovan Mitchell was out for the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think what we saw today was the weakness of the Cleveland Cavaliers bench show up against the New York Knicks. Knicks win 107-98 was the final in that one. Okay. Clippers took down the Timberwolves. Not surprising there. 89-88 was the final. That game could have gone either way. And Raptors took care of the Hornets fairly easily. 111-106 was the final. The Oklahoma City Thunder are now up by 18, and they are nearing halftime of that game. And the last game of the night in which we're going to talk about is the San Antonio Spurs game. And I just like, it's not so much that I want to talk about this specific game. I really am more focusing this conversation with you on the San Antonio Spurs organization and Victor Wembanyama. Now, I put out a couple podcasts on this recently. We've done some videos on this as well. And I think it's safe to say that Wemby is absolutely at that point now where he feels entirely comfortable with his game in the NBA. Now, you could see it during Summer League last year that he wasn't entirely comfortable. You could see it at the start of the season that he wasn't entirely comfortable. But then something happened. It was about 3 or 4 weeks into the season. I saw Victor play in a game. I saw him score over 25 points in that game, over 10 boards in that game. And I thought to myself, this kid is absolutely going to be the real deal. And where we're at today is, I think, Victor's at the point where he can basically do this night in and night out, given the opportunity. Now, the dysfunction of this San Antonio Spurs organization revolves around the fact that they didn't really make any really great deals at the trading deadline. They didn't do anything to actually make the San Antonio Spurs better. Now, I'm not suggesting they should have made a move to help the Spurs out this year. It's not about this year now. This year is lost. This year is also lost because the San Antonio Spurs organization did a poor job building a roster around the number 1 draft pick in the NBA. Somebody they knew they were going to have, heading into last year's free agency. And yet they did nothing. And I ask you this question: why? Why would the San Antonio Spurs purposely bomb this year with Victor Wembanyama? Now, the answer they'll give you is, well, it was a youth movement. We wanted to see what we had. we wanted to see what we had with Jeremy Sochan. We wanted to know, is Trey Jones really that great? By the way, Trey Jones, he plays really good some days, and then he has games like he had today. 30 minutes of basketball time in the National Basketball Association. Trey had 2 points, 4 assists, and 1 rebound. I literally could have done that. I am just saying. Keldon Johnson, 17 points tonight. Branham, 18 points tonight. And Devin Vassell, who's really the only other real consistent player on this particular San Antonio Spurs basketball team. He's the only other player worth really talking about when it comes to we could build a roster around with this piece. Now, maybe Jeremy Sochan is a 6th player or 7th player in a rotation on an okay basketball team, a basketball team that has a chance at making the playoffs. But he shouldn't be a starter with Victor Wembanyama. So they had all this time knowing that he was going to be their number 1 draft pick, and they did nothing to help him out this year. They decided to play the youth movement game, which makes absolutely no sense. Knowing that youth movement wasn't working, they still didn't do anything at the trading deadline to help Victor out this year, which would have helped him out next year. All right. Some quick thoughts there on the San Antonio Spurs organization. It's an organization that I believe has to get its act together this particular offseason, because Victor is such a once in a lifetime talent. He absolutely deserves to have a better team in and around him than he currently has. All right. And finally today, I thought we'd just take a quick look at the standings as we sit here on a Sunday night. Now, once again, the Thunder are currently playing right now. They're at halftime. They're up by 14 at halftime, and could be in first place, sole possession of first place by the end of the night, with the Timberwolves and the Nuggets tied for second. Or all 3 of those teams could essentially be tied for first at the end of the night. Either way, I think it's safe to say, as far as I'm concerned, that the Denver Nuggets are clearly the best team in the Western Conference right now. If the playoffs were to start today, the Nuggets would be the team to beat. As for the Clippers, a little disappointed how they've sort of handled players being out. Other players haven't really stepped up. At times, the Clippers have actually looked old down the stretch. Now, it's something that I hope doesn't affect the Clippers when they're actually in the playoffs and are in the middle of a 7-game series. You can take a game or 2 off in a 7-game series, but you can't take the entire 7-game series off, James Harden. So I still have hope that this Los Angeles Clipper team is the second best team in the Western Conference, but the rest of it is just all up in smoke. You never know which Sacramento Kings team's going to show up. You never know which Phoenix Suns team's going to show up. You never have any idea, will the Golden State Warriors win by 40 or be down by 44 at halftime? And then there's LeBron James and the Los Angeles Lakers, who are lucky that the Utah Jazz aren't going to threaten them for that 10th spot this year. The Lakers are by far the most dangerous of any of the bottom sort of 5 teams in the NBA, and it looks like they're going to actually have to play their way in to the playoffs. Look, they'll be dangerous. Don't get me wrong. Any team that has Steph Curry or LeBron James in the playoffs is always going to be dangerous. And LeBron James this year with AD and the team that they put around him could certainly be dangerous in a 7-game series. As for the Eastern Conference, not much to say. I mean, is there? The Celtics just look absolutely fantastic. They are now 48-12. They've won 11 games in a row, and we saw what they did to the Warriors today. I mean, I'm sure they'll lose a couple more games before the end of the season, and I'm sure they'll have a bit of a downslide somewhere between here and there. But the Celtics are absolutely the best team, at least in the Eastern Conference. You know how I feel about the Milwaukee Bucks. I need to see how they do against the Clippers before I'll go any further in talking about the Milwaukee Bucks. As for the Cavaliers losing at home to the Knicks tonight, sort of unacceptable, but no Donovan Mitchell. And as I mentioned, a bench, at least at that point guard, shooting guard position, which is not terribly strong. But as for the rest of it, you have to be really worried about wherever the Miami Heat end up. And I think this Indiana Pacers team has ran out of steam at this point. It's a team that is probably going to play 500 for the rest of the season. It's a team that can't quite figure out how to get Pascal Siakam integrated into their offense in a smooth way. It's a team that on nights forgets that Tyrese Halliburton is a star in the NBA. Like tonight, Tyrese Halliburton in his game against the San Antonio Spurs. Yeah, and who thinks of the San Antonio Spurs as a great defensive team? I mean, outside of Victor, who thinks of them that way? I mean, just 12 points tonight for Tyrese Halliburton. Like, that's not superstar mentality. That's not putting my team on my shoulders and taking them all the way to the promised land. So it is very interesting as you sort of look at that backside of the Eastern Conference, where everything's going to lie. I mean, as it stands, as crazy as this is to say, the Nets and dare I say even the Raptors are still in it, at least with regards to finding a way to sneak into the 10th spot, because the Atlanta Hawks, of course, have lost Trae Young for now. So it is anybody's game outside of the Hornets, Wizards, and of course, Pistons of Detroit. All right, that is it for our weekly Sunday night episode of the House of Takes NBA show. I want to thank you all so much for tuning into tonight's show. If you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet to our YouTube channel, please go ahead and do so. And of course, like this video. For the House of Takes NBA show, I'm Dave DeBaugh, wishing you all a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day.
You've been listening to the House of Takes NBA show with Dave Daba, presented by Stealth.ltd.